All right. So, Shalini, welcome. And thank you for accepting my request to do this interview. I know it was at a short notice, but nevertheless, thank you for accepting it.
Thank you, Robin. Happy to be here.
And I've been looking forward to having a chat with you because you are somebody who's been doing a lot of work on the future of work, how the work will look like uh, going forward in the future. And with COVID-19, everything has gotten accelerated. So, really wanted your thoughts. And since you're also the founder of OneCube along with Jaspreet Bindra, who's a writer himself, and you're a writer, so I thought this is a really good opportunity to kind of get to know your perspective on what's going to be the future of work for employees, for the mid-career professionals, the senior management, the owners, the promoters, the whole thing, how to look for them. Okay, so since we've been talking about future, we're already in the future that Alvin Toffler had talked about years ago in 1980 in his book, The Third Wave, and everything has gotten accelerated. So, what impact does it have on beginners, people who are just starting out on their jobs, mid-career professionals, and senior management?
Really good question. Now, the reality is that the organizations as we know them, as have we've been familiar with them over the last decade or 2 decades, they arose in a very different set of circumstances to solve a very different problem. And the central problem which organizations of today were solving were, how do we manage scale efficiently? So your hierarchies become really important, your process orientation becomes really important, efficiency becomes really important. And some of these have been, the underlying core principles behind the way organizations over the last many decades have functioned. What has really changed is that because of largely technology and globalization, organizations across the world and across pretty much every field are facing or will very soon be facing disruption. And the way organizations have been designed, they haven't been designed to be able to very quickly understand trends and respond to them. So there's a mismatch. Organizations were designed for efficiency and scale, but what we're going to need along with efficiency and scale, that's still important, is the ability to be innovative, responsive, to be able to be agile. And those are not qualities which organizations have traditionally fostered. So that's going to have huge implications. The biggest is that careers are not going to look anything like the careers of our generation, for instance, looked like. Even when we were starting out, India was just opening up, and there were so many opportunities for for people like us, to be honest. We really rode the wave. There were opportunities everywhere. In our generation, so long as you were not terrible, you were good. So definitely in the 90s and 2000s, so long as you were, in fact, a colleague once shared with me, and he was a senior MD of Deutsche Bank at the time. And in fact, he was also a classmate at IIM. And he told me, actually speaking, if someone can tie their shoelaces, we hire them. So, so the entry barriers were really low. You just had to be reasonably intelligent and willing to do some work, and you got hired. And of course, if you were smart enough, both in terms of your work and understanding how to navigate your organization, you rode the wave and became very senior very quickly. All that's set to change. We are in a recession as of today.
Yes.
The first time since liberalization that we are facing a recession. So keep in mind that India Inc., as it said, has no real experience with handling recession. This is absolutely the first time. There have only been 4 recessionary years since independence. This is one of them. And it's predicted to be the strongest recession of these. So, we're going to do things we have no experience of. But it's not as much the recession, but the uncertainty and the, shall I say, maybe the fewer job opportunities in established organizations we're going to see for a long, long time to come. So for beginners, it means that you're going to have to really think about how to build your career. Suddenly, the idea that you can join one or two organizations and ride the wave and reach the top, it will be a reality only for very, very few. So even in our generation, for instance, after 25, 26 years, it's only a small handful who have, remained within the mainstream corporate world and built their careers there. But it's going to be much fewer than even that, because, organizations are going to have to be designed very differently, and the corporate ladder is going to look very, very different. So for people who are starting out now, you really have to dig deep and say, what is it that I want to bring in a variety of contexts, of which the corporate world might be one of them. So huge shift for young people, and to be honest, their parents, because very often the parents expect their kids to have a career similar to theirs. It looks like those days are gone. It's not happening. For people who are mid-career now, it's a bigger challenge actually, because it means that now you have to adjust to a world which is going to ask for different things than what it did so long. So, you were told a certain story that, okay, to do well, you need to do A, B, C, D. But all of that suddenly changed because organizations are changing and middle managers are under huge, pressure. Middle management is going to be a very, very vulnerable layer as organizations move to a more agile structure and as automation, enters organizations in a large way. So if you're mid-career, it's really a time to dig deep and think about what is it that you bring, which is independent of the organization which you're part of, because maybe your career is going to be in this organization, but maybe not. You're very, very vulnerable. For senior leaders, now, for senior leaders, it's like a huge shift. They've grown up in an era where um, opportunities were abundant. You sort of just had to be respectful, do your job, and pretty much, other than two or three people right at the top who were thinking of, what's the long term, you could just manage business as usual and you would be fine. But that's changed. And it means donning a very different hat and understanding this shift. Some will, I'm sure, thrive in it and they will love every moment of it. The whole challenge of managing business as usual with business in the future will be super exciting, but not for everyone. It's not for everyone. So there will be many people at the top who will have this huge challenge that all that they prized so much when they were building their career may not actually be enough anymore. So
That is so interesting the way you covered the whole range. And that reminds me, I remember my dad sharing that when my dad was in the army, then after he left the army, he came to Bombay, picked up a job, then he got his younger brother. He said, and my Chacha ji was sharing with me, हमारे जमाने में तो ये होता था घर घर जाके पकड़ के लाते थे लोगों को चल क्या कर रहा है घर में बैठा है come and work okay you have done your 8 times it's enough you don't have to do 10th 11th 12th forget about graduation पढ़ाई कौन करेगा चलो 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 so he said after he joined Pfizer he said the villages around he said I went to the villages around the factory to pull young people come and work come and work come and work so that was that and then when I picked up a job it was like see, my father is from the generation you join a company and retire from there. So when I started working and changed my job, my father said, "What you changed? You hardly put in 3 years. You guys are not loyal at all. You can't be trusted." I said, "What has loyalty got to do with it?" He said, "Loyalty is when you join and you stay and retire. You guys are leaving in 3.5 years." And then I met Leela, who says advertising is 1.5 years is more than enough. I said, my dad will say, you guys should not be hired. To right now, what you shared, how the whole thing is moved. Earlier, you just had to stay in, you would do a job, like just satisfy, even if you're not satisfied, you can stay. But right now, you're just standing on, I think, on one toe, on a wall which has those spears, and trying to balance yourself. But the whole scenario is changed. Now people apply, thousands of them apply, and 2, 3 get in. versus what it was way back in 50s and 60s, and you have to drive people come and work. Well, I don't know what the future generations will deal with. And sometimes it's scary.
No, I think we are entering a time where pretty much everyone's going to have to re-examine their paradigms. And for some people, it's going to be fun, like uh, maybe some people will thrive on that change. Like personally, to be honest, if I speak about for me, I like that. I love the fact that we're going to be liberated from this more traditional kind of organization. I love it. I think it's fantastic. The opportunities are endless. But for many others, it may not be so much fun. I think it'll be a while before everyone realizes that the fundamental rules of the game are changed. Everybody sort of is beginning to hear about it. But I think it hits home only when you see it where you are. So when you see that happen in your organization and your friends and your family, that's when it hits home. It's going to be a rough few years, to be honest, because um, the rules of the game have changed. The announcements have gone out from a variety of places, but they're still gentle. And not everyone's heard them. And not everyone has believed them. And then not everybody knows what they want to do with that either. So, I think uh, it'll be some years before people figure out the new rules of the game. Some have already figured out, for instance, it's not that, but like the majority in the middle. It's like that, adoption cycle. The early adopters are there. The early majority might be there.
So, like you said, the major ones, I think the major ones are hopeful and optimistic.
Yeah, yeah.
So
True.
they're waiting. They're waiting. So that takes me to the question: is COVID-19 like the asteroid which millions of years ago fell on the Earth and wiped out the dinosaurs? Right. So is this COVID-19 also like that asteroid? So from that perspective, who are the dinosaurs now?
Oh,
And can these dinosaurs survive now and in the future? Which you,
really good question. You can see immediately there's been a death of the office.
yes.
I mean, you could not have even thought about this 6 months ago, that suddenly you'll have such a large percentage of people working from home. Now, Jaspreet and I had put out a survey on LinkedIn earlier this week asking people, over the next few months, do you see yourself working from home, going back to the office, or sometimes one and sometimes the other? And some 12% say they will go back to office, just 12%. 88% are roughly equally divided between those who are going to work entirely from home and those who are going to go to office for some days but then work from home, the hybrid model. So you can see that overnight you have big organizations, Facebook, Google, TCS, all making announcements of very large numbers working remotely. So we've immediately seen the death of the office the way we knew it. And in a way, because many of us have grown up with offices around us, we assume that that's the way things always were. But offices as an invention only came about in the 1820s, 1830s. So actually, it's like lasted 170 years.
Yes.
Now perhaps it's time for something else. So, I mean, that's the immediate thing you can see. And of course, that has huge implications because the moment you have shifted from a physical location where everybody is co-located to a distributed arrangement where people are working in their own spaces, it means a very different type of engagement is needed. How are you going to engage people, for instance? How are you going to build any kind of pride for working with an organization? How are you going to build camaraderie, culture? All of that comes up as a question that, how are you going to do that?
Yeah,
Huge.
what you're saying is very true. I have worked with a very large IT company. I was a project manager on IBM mainframes. And that point of time also, is though it was an IT company, okay, but still working from home wasn't clearly encouraged. It's only when somebody was expecting and she was on maternity leave and she was a very good resource, we wanted her to be there. They were asked to work from home, or somebody was unwell. Like I know one of the other project managers were unwell and had to keep going to the hospital, come out hospital. So he was given access, and some other people for some reason. But it wasn't like go and work from home. But now everybody, even the bosses who didn't want people to work from home, you had to be in the office at 9 and leave only after 6. So they have now turned around saying, okay, work from home.
Actually, the flip has happened, to be honest, too quickly to my mind. Why do I
Yes.
think that? See, working remotely has challenges which must be understood, and it needs a different way of leadership. Like your leadership has to be much more intentional. Like if you're in person, you're sitting in the same area, you're having lunch together, you're having coffee together, you're going out for a stroll, whatever, in your campus, etc., etc. You're building a bond which then is the foundation for your work. But now all of those activities, the random activities that you did with each other, they're not happening. So, your leadership has to be very, very different. It's much more intentional. You have to work specifically on the human side of it while you are working, on the work itself.
Yeah. So Mona Shukla of Corporate Edge, she has said that please don't call it the death of the offices. Reinventing the use of office. I am founder, promoter of Corporate Edge Service Offices.
Oh
And
no.
death of my business and passion is disheartening. I totally agree with you, Mona. Since this lockdown, all the interventions, workshops, trainings I was supposed to do in India and outside of India, everything is gotten postponed. I don't know when it will begin. I was supposed to travel to Dhaka, to Sri Lanka, and a lot of trainings in India itself. Everything has stopped. So I can completely get that. And I hope it's not going to the death of offices.
Mona, I think the office, what it's going to mean is different now. So I'm anticipating once the COVID thing, becomes, sort of, we've gone down the other side of the curve and safety, physical safety is no longer the prime issue. There will be maybe small corners close to your home, which could be, so it becomes more like work from anywhere.
Yes, yes.
That's work. Because there are limitations to what you can do if everyone's just working at home. On the other
Yes.
hand, you might see a new norm. So you're right, it is a reinvention, Mona. I mean, I understand it. Death of the Office probably sounds dramatic. Actually, there's a lovely article in 1843 magazine about this, that, is this the death of the office? And it is in a certain way that, whole emphasis on FaceTime. For decades, that's been a big deal. You don't leave the office before your boss leaves. You make sure you meet at least, if not every day, then every other day. All of that, the importance of FaceTime. Now your FaceTime is virtual. You still need it, but it's virtual. So right, I'll use the word reinvention if you like. I know it sounds a lot more positive, but it is the death of the office in the more traditional sense.
So Mona, I guess you and I will have to look for building some new careers. So going forward in the future, with the way you have talked about how the future looks like, how can one train oneself to become a specialist and stay adaptable?
The era of a narrow specialist is, when everything is changing. One of the key lessons from organizational science is that when change is very rampant, actually, it's generalists who do better than specialists. Yeah. So specialization is going to look very different. It's going to mean you have a core set of skills, this T-shaped thing, which has been around for a while, except that the T gets widened. It's your area, it's adjacent areas. It's also technology, because understanding technology in your space, whatever is the field you're working in, is now an essential skill. And on the other side, there's technology, and on this side, there is, understanding the soft skills part of it, being inventive, innovative, responsive, all of that gets added. So the T has gotten a little fattened, the bar on top has become a little longer. There's a core area where you are really, really strong. There is ability to move into adjacent areas, because without that, as the environment is shifting, for you to make shifts is really, really hard. So you don't want that. Your adjacent area, has to be a little wider. And then right at the top of the T, your ability to be responsive, creative, and then ability to understand technology get added. So it's a fat T at this point in time, not a very narrow T.
So what you have said, so my question is, will there be enough work few years from now?
Not
Because for the next few years, you said it's going to take a dive, but what after that?
again, there are hundreds of perspectives on this, and there are different people who are placing their bets, shall I say, at different places. I think, this is my own personal view, that for us, we definitely know that for a particular amount of work, whatever is that, however you define it, say 100 widgets, just as an example. If you needed 50 people, you're going to need 10, because of automation, technology, the fact that almost every role and almost every function over the next definitely 5 years or so will be technology enabled. So the number of people you will need is going to be reduced. So in established organizations, if it took, for 100 widgets, 50 people, you're going to need 10. Where the jobs might be is in people understanding the opportunity and then starting something of their own. And these, what do we say, entrepreneurial employees. Now they could be either a true entrepreneur where, it is my thing and I'm designing it and I'm running it because of an opportunity I have spotted. Or it could even be, as part of, say, an Uber driver. He's a mini entrepreneur, even though he's not really, he's not the owner of Uber. He's not thought of it. But on the other hand, he owns an asset. He gets a revenue. So we're going to see a lot of these they're not workers, they're not employees. They are semi-entrepreneurs because they own an asset, and that asset could be physical, it could be knowledge-based, whatever. They own an asset. They work with a larger organization who set up the process, and they are, sort of self-employed, but not exactly. So we're going to see a lot of rise of that because of the business sense it makes. So one of the things in any recessionary environment is you're first going to cut fixed costs, and we're seeing that across, right? Part of the reason why there's the death of the office is because in a recession, you don't want to pay the rentals. And Mona, I'm sure you've experienced that at this point in time. People want to lower their fixed costs. Part of it is the money they've invested in offices. The other part is the, sort of core employees. So like Uber, of course, the Uber organization has a set of core employees who work within Uber. But much more than the core employees who work within Uber is the driver network, right?
Yes.
So we're going to see a lot of that kind of organizational format where the core organization is not huge. So for instance, if an Uber were being set up, say 20 years ago, all the employees, Uber drivers would be Uber employees, because that's the way the mind used to work at that point in time, right? They would have said, you sign up with an employee and you're sort of part of the family of Uber. But all that shifted, right? So they are these semi-independent entrepreneurial workers who work with the opportunity that Uber has spotted. We're going to see much, much more of that because it makes sense for companies to go that route. It makes them agile. They can shift direction. They don't take responsibility for what happens to an Uber driver's livelihood, right? So many people, I'm sure Uber drivers in this lockdown period have really, really suffered because, I doubt if Uber is giving them any money, So I think they will pass on the risk to the other side because it makes commercial sense to do that. So I think we're going to see a lot more of.
So that, with that, it takes me to another question is, now income gaps are widening. Yeah, the concentration of wealth is increasing with a few people. I was reading somewhere that the the top 2% rich people of the world have 90% of the wealth. Top
Yeah.
2% and 90% of the wealth. So that's how concentrated it is. Jobless economic growth seems to be the new norm. Yeah, and return on investment, capital, and technology is usually better than labor.
Yeah.
So as labor costs go up and artificial intelligence and robot costs go down, manufacturing and service unemployment rates are expected to increase. Labor is getting expensive, and that's why all the manufacturing from US and other countries came to India, went to China, now going to Philippines. So what does one do in that case?
There's no easy answer, you know. There's this really nice book called Digital Nation, which looks at what might India do. So it's like exploring, you know, what do we do? Because it's a reality. What you said, all the things you said is correct. There's going to be a jobless recovery of sorts. In fact, it might be a so this whole piece of, as you said, return on investment of technology is better. So there are just so many economic factors which are going to push organizations to employ fewer and fewer people and substitute employees with technology. We're going to see that as soon as technologies, become available. So that's a reality. Bill Gates has been talking about, should we have a universal basic income if this becomes a reality across the globe? Obviously, it's a very politically sensitive issue. So I think very few politicians are ready to engage with this. One of the ideas which this book, Digital Nation, puts forward is that let's take the fact that the organized sector is going to employ fewer and fewer people. And let's take the fact that in India, we have a huge shortage of employees of a certain kind. Like, for instance, our healthcare needs, are tremendous across the country, but our doctors are concentrated in urban areas. So there's a gap. There's a gap between what the needs of the country are and what's actually available. So one possibility could have been that we train, lots of doctors, but we've seen that doctors, when they get trained for their own personal growth reasons, are very reluctant to work in a village. Why would they, right? They would want to work in a town. So doesn't work. You can't just train doctors. So what, they have suggested is, what if we have doctors in the towns and cities, because that's where they want to be, and we have healthcare workers who are from the villages, who use technology, even like a simple thing like an iPad, and to bridge the gap where they are working along with a doctor to do the treatment, because it then provides employment to the people where they are. It provides a service where people need it, and it leverages technology. So then these healthcare workers who are working in the village, for instance, they become part of that network which I was speaking about. They're semi-entrepreneurial because, they make the investment. In this case, it might be an iPad. That's their personal investment in this.
And that you're saying, it's farmers are already doing that in a huge way in Andhra and in Telangana.
Yeah.
One of my friends was very much involved in that project.
Yeah. So, things like this, those are possibilities, and they make a lot of sense. Similarly, we don't have good, it's a reality. Our education system has a long way to go if we want to provide good education to everybody. This time we can actually leverage technology, right? So there are many problems which we can solve using manpower, which is semi-entrepreneurial, just the way I was, saying. They're not like employees. They are making their own investment. They're semi-entrepreneurial, but they're not fully entrepreneurial. They're not coming up with the concept and, how to execute it. So they're like semi-entrepreneurs, but they get in with their investment and then, fulfill a need which is in that area. Now, if we go that route, to be honest, it would be brilliant, because it allows us to both solve basic society level issues and problems, and provide employment, and leverage technology, and sort the problem of, what do we do about jobs? But these are policy decisions where at some level politicians will have to, decide whether they want to go this route. Private players have done something. So for instance, at Tata Memorial Hospital, they'd set up this nerve center, what they call a Tata Nerve Center for Healthcare, which follows exactly, this challenge that what if we use technology and healthcare workers in an area to solve their problems rather than everybody traveling to the nearest town, which puts pressure on the hospital also. So let's see what direction we take.
Keeping our fingers.
Yeah, keep our fingers crossed.
So in the same way, Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk, Bill Gates have been warning the world about the potential dangers of artificial intelligence
Yeah.
going beyond the human control. So will AI, robots, nanotech, synthetic biology, and other forms of futurist technology replace work more than they create? It looks like it's that. So are we creating a Bhasmasura for ourselves?
I think we need to decide how we want to proceed. Every single person who has been, really well regarded in this field has said, be careful. All of them are saying, be careful. Elon Musk, in fact, sponsors a foundation. I forget what it's called, but there's a whole foundation which looks at this society level issue of what's going to be the impact of AI, etc. So a lot of people who have been at the forefront of this, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and many, many others, have spoken about this concern. So I think I'm not a technologist, but from whatever I read, technologically it is possible. Technologically, it is possible that we develop what's called a general artificial intelligence. Right now, what we have are more specialized forms of artificial intelligence where they operate within one context. But as we get more and more connected, because that's what we're doing, right? So we have IoTs which speak to, AI which speaks to robots, which speak to something else. So, every piece is getting connected. And Ray Kurzweil, who's this really famous futurist and has been correct on his predictions of technology, over the last many, many decades, he suggests that we might have generalized artificial intelligence by 2030, 2040. So that's really not far away. Now, it depends on the choices we make now of what we want that to do, because the moment you have a generalized artificial intelligence, which has the intelligence of human beings, the next day it's smarter than human beings, because
Yes.
we need thousands of years of evolution to become smarter. Whereas, a generalized AI probably needs like maybe a few hours or something like that. So, human beings, it depends on the choices we make. The technological possibility.
Yeah, because I remember when I was working for this IT company, and we were specialists in the travel industry. So many airlines we were hosting and working on maintenance of their software, developing new software. Now I know when we came out with electronic ticketing, that put thousands of people who used to make manual tickets. Remember those? It used to be like a packet, 3, 4 pages you have to tear, and now it's only one page thing. Many people must have lost their jobs when we did that. Similarly, banking, when it got computerized, a lot of people who couldn't work took voluntary retirement. And of course, that gave banks the opportunity to expand their network also. So those people got transferred. So I don't know where we are heading.
So I see a question by Somnath. I see.
Yes.
Hi.
About Uncube, about your brainchild Uncube.
Okay. So Somnath, Uncube is Jaspreet Pindra. Hi. Okay. So we've come together to form this organization called Uncube, as you know, and of course, as the name suggests, it means you have to think differently for the future. Now, we are starting off by being a, think tank, advisory, education organization. Over the next few years, we may evolve into, a different form of organization. We have some plans which we haven't, we're not ready to maybe speak about as yet, but we're certainly going to be in the business of both, coming up with ideas that will be helpful for organizations in managing the future of work, and in working with them both as educators and as partners in implementing them. So that's what Uncube is about. Does that sort of answer? Any other question? I'd be really happy to share.
Yeah, so Shalini, what I wanted to, and I got a somewhat understanding of the
Somnath,
part.
you will have to speak louder. Shalini, I can't hear him. Can you?
Somnath, your voice is faded away. It started out strong, but then...
Yeah, is that clear now?
Better. Better. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so Shalini, what I was saying is I got a little broader understanding about the Uncube. So is it like, how are you going to work on this transformation of the workplaces? Are you sort of going to provide, as a consultant, you are going to provide ideas to the corporates, or what is this?
Yeah, it's both education and consulting. So for some organizations, it might be just education. That's the level of engagement. For others, it might be education followed by let's partner with them and work with you for a period of time. So it's a combination of both.
All right. Thanks.
Thank
you for asking that.
Shalini, you have been talking about future and what the future looks like. So my question now is, are India-based companies, not Indian companies, but India-based companies aligned with the emerging needs of the future workplace?
Oh gosh. I don't know, to be honest. I think in the Indian spectrum also, that's a very wide spectrum. We have many organizations which are very tech savvy, very. And we did a study in the early, say the first 8 weeks of COVID, lockdown, etc., to speak to some of these organizations who made overnight decisions, I can't unfortunately take their names because they've asked me not to, but say one was a fitness center which went from physical to digital. Another was an alcohol company which, moved to sanitizers. Another was a sanitary pad company which started making masks. So like that, we collected some examples of organizations which are, very savvy. And there is that whole generation. They tend to be headed by tech entrepreneurs in general, or entrepreneurs if they're not technologists themselves, then they have some passion or affinity for technology, and are somewhere between 0 to 15 years old. Although one of the organizations I spoke about is much older than that also. So it's not that it's only the young organizations. There are older organizations which have designed themselves to be adaptive as well. So there is definitely this, there are these organizations which are very much at the edge. The founders of those organizations know exactly, how the future is unfolding. Many of them are investors in many other technology companies, which, gives them a ringside view of what's happening next. So we have a cadre of that for sure. And it's a good cadre. It's a good cadre. We have people who are very well educated in this field, and very smart and very aware. So there's that set. There is also a set of organizations which is very old school, where they are still, trying to solve problems of the past. So this is not even on their horizon. In fact, when they hear this, the first thing is, what do we do with this, So there is that as well. And of course, a whole bunch in the middle. So I think we are going to see this widen as we go over the next few years, because the organizations which are at the frontier will move ahead very fast. And I think we have quite a few organizations at that frontier. We're going to move very fast. They're going to spot the opportunities. Their founders are often tech entrepreneurs who already know this is going to happen, that's the opportunity, and are going to make that transition very quickly. And we're going to see, so I think the curve is going to get longer over the next few years.
So with this whole new paradigm that's kind of started already, what kind of corporations will survive and further flourish?
Yeah, so they will be decentralized. So they will be centralized in some ways and decentralized in some ways. So let me put it like that. It's not like completely decentralized.
Like a hub and spoke model.
Yes, something like that.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what's going to be. So the core, some ideas will be centralized. Some ideas are like the foundation of what you're building the organization on. That's going to be centralized. It's going to be founder, entrepreneur, whatever that driven. Who's going to say, okay, these 4 or 5 principles, whether they are technology principles, cultural principles, business principles, I don't know. But this is where I'm drawing the box. We're going to operate in this zone with this philosophy. But at the same time, independence of many other units, because the reason why you need independence is that otherwise you're going to be too slow for the future. If everything is centralized, you're not going to make it. You're going to need speed, and speed comes from decentralized decision making. So for instance, even if we look at the COVID crisis and we look at, the organizations which adapted very fast, they adapted fast because their part of the, organization had the freedom to look at the situation and come up with a creative response. Had it been a tightly held, centralized organization, they couldn't do that. By the time they get approvals, the whole lockdown would have been over. So if you want to make fast shifts, you need decentralized organizations. You need organizations which are designed very, very differently, so that there's a lot of informal communication, a lot of horizontal communication, a lot of peer-to-peer sharing of ideas, and a willingness to experiment when you don't know how something will unfold. So, gone is the era of, the very traditional kind of strategy formulation, where you collect immense amounts of data and then you say, okay, ABC. Now you collect data, and there's much more data now than there's ever been in the past. You quickly use, whatever your analytics to see what are the trends. And then you make a bet. You say, okay, let's try this. But you're not going to try it by changing the whole organization. You're going to try it as an experiment with a limited expense. But speed is important. So something you can do quickly. You don't have to be sure. You don't know. Many of these experiments will not work out. But okay, you say, okay, let's take X amount of money instead of 10X amount of money. And let's see what happens if we do ABC. So those are the kind of organizations which will have a huge edge, because when everything around is changing really quickly, what you need is responsiveness. And the traditional organization does not give you responsiveness.
That means a whole lot of empowerment has to be given to the decentralized places. Yeah. So only then they will be able to make decisions.
Absolutely.
They don't have to wait for Bade Babuji aayenge, wo paper dekhenge, and then we'll see.
Yeah, so like at Uncube, that's the kind of work which we will be doing with organizations to help them think about, okay, these are the larger global trends which are influencing the environment we are operating in. Understanding that, what does it mean for the design of the organization? What does it mean for the kind of capabilities people need? What does it mean for the culture of the organization? Because when you want quick, responsive, creative, innovative organizations, there are some cultural parameters which have to be there. Their absence will not allow it. Like, for instance, you need psychological safety. Psychological safety is, I think something, I can say it. If you don't have psychological safety, you're not going to have any kind of creative response, no matter what change you make in a structure form. So, there are some of these fundamental shifts which have to happen. And at Uncube, actually, that's really our thinking that, organizations are going to need to think very differently to become responsive. And maybe we can help by sharing both the ideas which are going to be behind it, and working with them to redesign themselves, design, culture, capability. Those are some of the pieces.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. That means even not only companies, individuals also have to be on the balls of their feet.
100%. In fact, a week or two ago, I wrote this article called Ambidextrous Minds.
Yes.
About this. Because till now, the whole idea was ambidextrous organization,
Yes.
where an organization had to have the capacity for business as usual and creative response. And pretty much you divided the organization. You said, okay, 90% of the organization you do BAU, and 10% is going to, or maybe less than 10%, maybe like 5% is going to see, okay, what's in the long term, the short horizon, medium horizon, long horizon, that kind of a thing. But now there's no area where BAU doesn't involve change. So for instance, just as an example, if you're an HR leader, how are you going to be an HR leader if you don't incorporate the technology changes, right? Because your organization is going to need to be designed differently. Your function is going to need to be designed differently. So it's not that, okay, there's that new projects team which is going to figure this out. Every business leader has to figure this out for their own piece that, okay, what's this going to mean? You're a manufacturing head. You cannot anymore say, okay, this is the plant, it's set up, I'm just going to manage the efficiency. No. Your IoTs are going to make such a huge difference. The implications of AI, the implications of, robotics, and many, many more. So you're going to have to, even wherever traditionally there was business as usual, there is no business as usual anymore. Every place is impacted. So that's a huge shift.
This reminds me something a coach of mine years ago had said, that life is like Mount Never Rest. People have heard about Mount Everest, but it's like life is a Mount Never Rest. Looks like even workplaces are going to be like Mount Never Rest.
Absolutely.
Because what you know today is obsolete tomorrow.
Yeah.
Keep upgrading this one. Okay. So we got to be prepared, not just for life, even work is going to be Mount Never Rest. The mountain that has no top.
True. Well said.
Yeah? Wow. Well, at least we have moved ahead from there. It's all the future generations that's going to be dealing with that. Okay, so I have really kind of completed my questions. I will throw it open to Akshay, Anupama, and Somnath if they have some questions of you.
Sure.
I think it would be interesting because Akshay started working about 3 years ago. He works for an IT company in Bangalore. So Akshay, you have any questions of Shalini? You should ask. Anupama, please ask her questions because it relates to the kind of work we are also doing. And Somnath, any questions you have?
For me, in my offices right now, they are open. They're saying that you should come to office only and only if you need to work on the hardware in office. Suppose, like, if I need to go to office, I'll only go to office if I need to access the mainframe. On the other hand, since it is the company I work for is analog devices, and they work on chips and all of that, so they need to have certain people work in the hardware labs, and it is open for them. So I have seen that people are going there because on the Skype chat, on the Skype and Slack chat, we can see that what these certain people are in office. But looking at that and looking at the number of people who actually go to office, will there be a possibility that most companies will shift to much smaller offices and not take over complete buildings? Instead of that, have like an open space? Of course, for the hardware, they may have to set up their own office, but that will be a much smaller office. So do you think that that is something that will happen in the future? That most of the people who work on softwares will stay at home, like managers may stay at home and work, and most employees may stay at home and work. But the people who work in labs, they will be required to, work from office.
It's a really good question, Akshay. So see, there are three primary drivers. I don't know what will finally happen, but there are three primary drivers. The first big one is, does it make economic sense? So for any business, obviously it makes economic sense. Unless you own the property, renting a property, which is true for most, spaces, it's a huge cost. It's a huge cost. So unless I'm in a business which is booming and I have a lot of cash, I'm going to search for how do I conserve cash. And that's where most companies are today. So does it make economic sense? We know, yes, it makes economic sense for most companies. Question number two, is there social acceptability? So like if we were talking a year ago and it was an organization which said, okay, you can work from home, there was really no social acceptability for that. it would have been, maybe your organization is like a failure if you can't have a big office, because that was like a mark of success, right? And if you're all working from home, maybe you're in some kind of trouble, business trouble. That's why you're all working from home. But we've seen that with some of the world's biggest, fanciest companies making this announcement that, our employees can work from home, whatever, the whole of 2020 or indefinitely or whatever, the social acceptability of that has very suddenly, come about. And the third is, what's been the leader's own experience of this whole distributed workforce? From all that I hear, the experience, while mixed, is largely positive. I think most people are surprised at how much they can actually do virtually. I don't think all organizations are very skilled at it. So I often speak to people who are really hassled because they found, things like their managers have become micromanagers now because they can't see them. They're calling them up like 10 times a day, and, they don't have a personal life because there's no end time to their work. So we see that there are many organizations which haven't been skilled at virtual working because it requires a certain kind of skill. And I'm hoping that, organizations will know how to do this well over the next few years if they are making this choice that a lot of it is virtual. So while I don't know what will finally happen, if we look at the three main drivers, the economic logic of it, the social acceptability, and leadership's own preferences, all three seem to suggest that we are going to see more and more of that.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you, Akshay.
Anupama has put some thing on the chat.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree with what Anupama is saying.
Somnath, any other question you have?
Robin, I wanted to learn that I'm working with TCS, so they have implemented this secure borderless workspace, that is SWBS. So yeah, so they have said that by 2025 they will have their, till 2025 the 75% of the workforce will be working with the model of work from home. So don't you somewhere as an employee, it's like something that there is a, as you said, the work has no end while we are from work from home. So there is a difficulty in the work life balance coming out in these days. So how do or how are the companies are they going to modify their HR policies so that they can bring the work life balance all together in this pandemic?
Great question, Somnath. So I'll give you my view. I think the lockdown, see, it all happened pretty much overnight, right? One day you were working in office and the other day you were not. I think most organizations had no time to think through what this means for both work and leadership. And, they just got thrown into it depending on the individual manager or leader. Some did it well, others didn't do it well. The problems you spoke about, the fact that there is, for many, there's like no work-life balance because work just doesn't have an end point. It's real. Many organizations are, saying that. People you meet also speaking about the fact that they're working much longer hours now than they ever did before. I'm hoping that organizations understand the, how to do virtual working well. Because I think it was so abrupt that not enough thought went into how to do virtual working well, because it's not the same as when you're in office. It's different. One difference is, as you said, there is no end time to the day. But there are many other differences as well. And they relate to both leadership, culture, engagement, all the soft piece of it. How do you manage it? And we know from the experience of many of the organizations in the US that to manage this well, you actually do need some kind of, you need three things. One is you need some kind of hybrid where people do have an opportunity to meet in person at some periodicity. Now, you can decide what that periodicity is, but that person-to-person connection in flesh and blood, if you like, it does help. It does help with bonds, it helps with engagement, etc., etc. we also know that virtual working works when people have a little more say about how they're setting up their day. So, for instance, in the US, a certain percentage of most big companies, a certain percentage of their employees have been working from home a few times a week for many, many years now, right? So that's been much more acceptable there. And people who worked from home for many years love it because, it works for them. But it works for them because they have a say on how they are planning their day. In India, we haven't seen as many organizations get this piece right as yet. Doesn't mean they won't get it right. They will get it right because, or many will get it right because, people like you are going to bring this up, right? That, this is a problem. We're not happy with it. And, people like me are going to say that, yeah, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't do good things for employee engagement over a period of time. So if you want to build culture, you want to truly live your values, then we need to find an answer where individuals have some greater flexibility in how they plan out their day so that work-life balance is maintained. And there's if you're in meetings all the time, there is a real challenge that when do you do creative work? So for those reasons.
Exactly so. Thanks, Sally.
Thanks so much.
Charlie, this takes me back to many, many years when one of the bosses I knew, he only said, I want the work done. To finish that work in 2 hours, don't sit in the office, get out, go home, watch a movie, do whatever. I'm interested in the work getting done. I'm not going to bother about following up with you because in the morning we have decided this is to be completed, this is to be done, it's agreed upon. In the weekly meetings it was decided, morning huddle it was done. You know what's to be completed. You have done it, you have to sit for 15 hours in the office and do it. Do it. If it's done in 2 hours, get out. And he also believed if you're spending more than 8 hours in the office, you are highly inefficient. So you shouldn't be working. So there are those kind of bosses also.
I think these are organization-wide conversations, and I think many, many organizations are going to have to deal with this. They're going to have to deal with the fact that now that we're going to be working virtually for, at least the foreseeable future and maybe forever. What does this mean? And there are two parameters that we're seeing being extremely important. One is data. So one of the facts is that, data is far more accessible today. You know who's doing what, how things are moving and whatever, than it was ever in the past. So data analytics as a sort of, what's really happening in your organization, who's doing what, etc., etc., and an increase in the need for trust. You can't really do virtual working without trust. It's like
absolutely
micromanagement where you just हुआ काम हुआ ये कर दिया so I think there's a huge shift needed. I think organizations are just beginning to realize that it's not a simple thing of moving your laptop from office to home. It needs a different mindset.
It does very much. Shani, with that I'm complete. Any advice you want to give to the MSMEs?
That's a tough one. I think for MSMEs, what is really important is to be future oriented. Many entrepreneurs draw their idea of organization and business from organizations and business they have seen in the past, because that's 99%, right? MSMEs don't have that kind of money to make quick shifts at this point in time. So, just think future. Build yourself so that you're an organization of the future right now, rather than building yourself on a model which may have worked in the past, but is becoming obsolete very quickly. So being very future oriented would be the biggest advice. Do not look at what's happened in the past as much. I mean, look at that, but use that just as, okay, that happened in the past. What can we learn from that? But what's going to happen in the future? Because you're going to have to make investments which ideally should have a return over a period of time. And I've seen this. There was a talk I was doing with auto component manufacturers who said exactly this. They said, one person said, I made this huge investment in some part for some tractor, whatever, something. But then that company, a year later, decided to change the design of that engine to a more future, compatible design. And then that whole investment that he had made went waste. And for an MSME, that's a question of life and death. You don't have such deep pockets. So you have to be very future oriented in the way you make your investments. Don't look at, yes, ये part इतने साल से चल रहा था, तो इसमें इतनी profitability थी. वो थी, लेकिन will it be true tomorrow? You have to look at that.
That's true. Very, very true. Right, Shalini. So with that, I'm coming to the close of this absolutely brilliant chat.
Thank you, Robert.
And so thank you so much for taking your time out on a Sunday morning to do this. So I'm going to be putting up this recording. This whole thing has been recorded on Facebook, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. So inviting everybody to watch this and really see what you can take away.
I think I will also share it, and maybe anyone who's been part of this and likes it, please share it with your.
Yes. Thank you, Shalini.
Once
Thank you
again,
so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Shalini. Bye-bye.